Hey, thank you so much for getting this course. My name is Matt Tyler. I'm super excited to be sharing this information with you. This is something that I wish that I had when I started, so I know it's going to save you a lot of time and frustration. Let's get into it. So we'll be doing two different types of corners. One is going to be a filed corner and the other one is going to be a what I'll call a radius corner. And they both kind of have their own time and place. So the tools that I'm using is for the grinder, I'm using a 5-inch Metabo variable speed grinder. Now, the brand doesn't matter that you use, but variable speed is important because we will be turning down the speed almost all the way down. Next is our sander. So if you have air, DA sander is really great. You can do any corded sander, orbital sander, DeWalt, Harbor Freight, whatever. They'll all do the trick. This is just what I have. So this is a cordless Milwaukee sander. Then for our abrasives, so we will have two different backing pads that will go on our grinder. So the first one is going to be to accept the fiber disc, and most abrasive companies will make their own version of these two. So one for our fiber disc, and then we've got another one for our sanding disc. All right, and so now we can move on to the actual disc that I'm using. So we've got a 60 grit fiber disc. That'll be our first step. Second step is going to be 120 grit sanding disc, and then 80 grit sanding disc for our sander. And the sanding discs are both 5-inch and the fiber disc is 4.5. All right, let's get into fit up. So I'm always going to be beveling my tubes before I go and clamp anything together. And so it's going to be this side, and this side. And I'm not worried about that inside corner. All right. And when I'm beveling, I'm typically doing, a 45-degree bevel, and I'm going like halfway through the material, somewhere around there. And I've never once had a single problem with a weld breaking. So there's that. All right, so a big thing for fit up is going to be that these two pieces are in the exact same plane. If I have say you're MIG welding and you have a little BB that gets caught on the table, you don't notice it. Now this piece, you go to clamp these together. Now this piece is just a little bit lifted up, and it can be so small that you don't even notice it till you go to grind. And so what I will often do is before I tack anything together, say I have it all clamped, I'll go down and I'll go eye level with it and just make sure that this is flat. You can also look underneath between the table and the piece, and you'll see daylight in there. And that'll be a good way to solve some problems before it gets worse. All right, so now we've gone over that, we can go ahead and get these welded. Like I said, I'm gonna do TIG on one side, MIG on the other, and it's gonna give you kind of a better perspective on what the two look like. So we are back with our TIG welded side and our MIG welded side. So for some situations, you're gonna need to weld that inside corner, and sometimes you're not. For what I'm doing, oftentimes I intentionally don't weld that inside corner just to get a cleaner look, and I don't have to be concerned about the strength or anything, as long as I'm getting good penetration.
Now let's get into grinding. So we are using that 60 grit fiber disc. And in this stage, we're really just removing the bulk of the weld. So we're not necessarily trying to get scratches out. This one is just getting that weld off. And so if we have a good fit up, then we can keep our grinder going forwards and backwards. And sometimes with a bad fit up, you're gonna have to go left and right just to kind of get at, those high spots and low spots at a certain angle. That way you're not gouging out the material. So having a good fit up is very key to make this process faster and less frustrating. So you'll see the outside corner is going to come together first. And then once I get that, then I'm just going to kind of start focusing more on that inside corner. So basically that outside section is done. And now I'll start focusing more on that inside. Again, just keeping my pattern in the same direction. And as soon as we bring it together, we want to immediately stop. That way we don't start gouging. Now, this is 2-inch square tubing. So oftentimes this will be out of square. Sometimes you'll get it and it'll be, almost perfect, and sometimes it will be way off. And obviously the more out of square the tubing is, the harder your fit up is going to be. No matter how much you try, it's just going to be tricky. So kind of expect that. The larger the tubing gets, the more out of square it's likely to be. So now we're doing this outside corner. What I like to do is I'll start on one side and I'll bring that weld completely off. And then I'll jump over to the other side, bring that side completely down. And then I'll actually kind of round out the outside corner. And then I'll come back and just kind of hit that top two little sections on the right and left. Now we're switching to the 120 grit sanding disc. And so in this stage, we're really just taking the scratches out. So now I really want to keep my grinder going in the same direction. So I'm going forwards and backwards. And this step should be pretty quick because we already really got that weld off. And so now this one is just really focusing on the scratches. So that top section is done. And now we're going to work on this inside corner. So if you had to weld that inside fillet, this process is going to be the same. You just have to take off a little bit less if that inside fillet is welded. And like in this case, I did not weld that inside fillet, so there is a little bit more material to remove to kind of bring it all together. So what I like to do is I'll start parallel with that inside tube, and then I'll just slowly start wrapping it around, and I'll bounce back and forth. Now we're moving on to the sanding. So this is the 80 grit disc, and we're really just kind of moving around. This step should be very quick. If you have visible scratches, then you just need to go back to a previous step. Try putting on a new disc. You're going to go through more discs than you probably want to or think that you need to. This is a nicer finish, so it does cost more money. It costs more money in abrasives, but that's just kind of comes with the territory of doing the nicer finish. So just don't be surprised by that, by how often you're gonna have to put new discs on. So we're really just we're wrapping those corners again, bringing in the radius of the tube to the radius where we ground, and we are just about wrapping up, and that's it. Now I'm going to show you we're going to go through it again a little bit quicker from a few different angles, but that's really it right there. Now we're moving on to the TIG welded tube. So automatically, this is much smaller weld to grind, which I prefer it. Anything that requires less grinding is a good thing, in my opinion. So, we're just moving forwards and backwards, really focusing on trying to only take the weld off and trying to avoid as much as possible hitting the tubing. So you can see on the right side, and we're kind of starting to hit it, which is, it's going to happen as you bring this all together. We just want to kind of eliminate anything that's unnecessary. So now that section in the front, or the fillet weld, is starting to come together. The middle still needs to be brought together. Now I'm kind of focusing on the outside, bringing in that middle. So that one's done. Now that outside where it's closest to me, that's all that's left. Little bit left, and then we are done. And as soon as I bring that all together, I'm going to stop. Then I'll be able to go ahead and move on to the next stage. So that's for the top. That's completely done for this stage. We can just kind of knock off that weld on that corner. And that's it for this. So we're going to go ahead and move on. All right, and so we again are just wrapping it around the corners, working back and forth. Really trying to focus on not gouging out the other tube as we go into that corner. You want to be careful not to be, pushing too hard into it. Again, using this pad that's kind of like a soft foam, and also having the variable speed where we're bringing our speed down is going to help reduce that. But again, that just takes time doing it over and over again, and you'll get the hang of it, and it'll just kind of know how far you need to go, and and what's too far. So on this one with the TIG welded outside corner, I have barely anything I have to remove. So this is, you know, very quick. Another reason why I like doing it this way. So we are just bringing it all together. Barely putting any pressure down. I mean, that's basically it right there. That top section is done. Now I'm hitting that outside corner, just bringing that all together, matching that radius of the tube. And, you know, having the variable speed just gives you way more control. It can kind of get out of hand. If you're on a regular grinder, you know, how many RPMs it's going, it can really quickly start gouging material out, and it can kind of get away from you pretty quickly. So now again, we're just doing that 80 grit sanding disc, hitting that top section first, then we can start wrapping the corners, bringing that all together, just matching the radius of that tube. And this, you know, it's going to take you time. Don't be surprised if you get frustrated. You know, it takes a lot of patience to not, everything in you is going to want to hurry up. You're going to want to speed through the process, especially, you know, if you have other things going on, you have a ton of these to do, you know, every part of you is just going to want to hurry up and get through the process, you know, just get on to the next thing. And so you'll start pushing harder than you should, you know, just start cutting corners. And so it's definitely it's a character building process doing this and doing it consistently. But just, you know, keep it up and you'll get it.
All right, so now we're going to file our corner. So before we sand it, this is when I will do the corner filing. So on this tubing, so the tubing is flat, and then that radius starts. So right where that radius breaks, I'm gonna set my combo square. Here, I'll just do a little sample line so you can see. So this is basically the place that radius starts. So I'm gonna take that break line, and I'm gonna transfer that to this inside of this joint. I'm gonna do that to both sides. And now I have exactly where that joint needs to be filed to. So we're going to clamp this down. All right, so I'm using a 7-inch slim taper file. It's Grow Bay file. I think I'm saying that right. You do not have to use this kind of file. You could really use almost anything. I did it for a long time with just a regular old Harbor Freight file, and you can get the same thing done. This is just a little bit more efficient because it's that triangle. I can basically just rotate it to one side or the other instead of having, you know, just a little bit more work with using like a standard flat file. So what I'm going to do, kind of initiate my line. So I'm imagining from the center point I made to the very inside corner of that joint, I'm basically just imagining a line that's going all the way through there. And I'm going to start establishing that line with my file right into the middle. So I'm just going to start working it down, staying in the middle, and then I'm starting to work that line back to the corner that I just marked with the Sharpie. All right, and as I come back, now before I get to that line, I'm going to start going to the left and to the right and bringing those two sides down. So you can do, you know, a couple passes on this side, a couple passes on this side, and just work your way back and forth. And I'm just being very aware of my Sharpie lines, because that is what I am bringing them to. It can be very easy to go too far or too deep. This definitely takes some practice. I know I could use more practice. But this is a good way to keep things consistent. And so you're not kind of like guessing on where you need to go to. So say you could do it like this for a while, and then once you get kind of your habit, you can see it in your head, then you can stop marking it out. But this can really help you at the beginning when maybe it doesn't make a ton of sense. All right, so we're almost there.
Now, as I'm watching this, it is taking me an eternity to get through this. So when you're normally following this, it does not take this long. You know, trying to explain how I'm doing it while doing it, you know, coming up with, you know, how do I want to, you know, communicate this. Definitely slow down the process. So, you know, it might seem unrealistic that you would do this on a project if it's going to take that long for one weld. So, you know, it is quicker, especially when you do it over and over again. It gets a lot faster. So just want to kind of note that as you're watching this. You know, I sped it up just to not make you sit there and watch it forever, but there you go.
So here is our finished corner. Now after this stage, you are ready for sanding. All right, so there you go. So now comes the time where you take all this stuff, you go into the shop, you start to put it to practice. You know, be very patient with yourself. You're not gonna get it the first time. You know, understand that this is a process. It does take, you know, just doing it over and over again for it to start to click. And it will click, just stick with it. You know, there's times where even when I do it now today that I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. So that feeling of I don't know what I'm doing is normal, it's okay. You know, just keep at it. You will get it, you will get better at it. There's kind of two ways you can connect with me. If you want to ask questions and you're having issues through Instagram, you can reach out to me at Matt Tyler Designs. Also have a Patreon account set up where we can kind of go in more in depth, more detail, and that is also Matt Tyler Designs. So again, thank you so much for getting this. I hope that it helped you. I know this is, again, something that I wish that I had that would have saved me a ton of time. So I'm so excited to put this out and share this with you. Yeah, have a great day.